Hi, good afternoon. This is Michael Harris, and we are closing out week three in our course of advanced project management. And this title is The Need for Project Management Metrics. First and foremost, this was a very extensive uh, chapter that we had to go through. It was broken down into 8 segments. So, one of the things that I'm a firm disbeliever in, if I could put my 2 cents in from the get go, is this will be death by PowerPoint. This is 20 slides, and it goes into some great detail. But overall, I thought the assignment was great. Um, it had a lot of information in there, and it made a lot of sense. And um, so here we go. So the first question that they asked us was, can the failure of the research and development department actually be this devastating to a company? Now, what was going on? They had a company that started out and they ended up headed in the wrong direction. And as usual, when the CEO or the president of the company comes in, they start looking for some answers. And this company here was seemingly uh, perfect for throwing each other under the bus. So they had some things that were going wrong, and the blame game started happening. And so, like I said, the question was, can the failure of the R&D department actually be this devastating to a company? And I would contend yes. And when I say that if one section of a company is broken, then that can affect the company as a whole. You want your company to run like a well-oiled machine, and the R&D department is often considered an integral part of the company. And in this particular scenario, that holds true. So when a project fails, go bad, or project failures go bad, and the failure occur, is it a common practice for finger pointing and the blame game, even at the executive levels? Absolutely, of course. Um, Unfortunately, this is a part of human nature. Everyone loves praise, and we all struggle with negative criticism. It is that fight or flight mechanism that we all have inside us, and it does not discriminate at any level. Everybody will do whatever they can to shift the focus off of them and place the blame on someone else. Um, and we went on and looked at some things, and we looked at some exhibits. And the information that is found in Exhibit 1, this is the life cycle phases that they have incorporated. It identified 7 of the 12 project failures that have occurred over a 12-month period that resulted in the loss of millions of dollars. The information that was lacking to me in Exhibit 1, I would want to know who is responsible for what. You have to have somebody accountable uh, for everything that's going on. I would have assigned each section to a particular group of people and used their input as to what went well and what went not so well. But the bottom line is you have to have, if you have projects, you have to put somebody in charge of it and hold them accountable. So, they ask, is it possible for highly talented resources to overthink an R&D project to the point where they look for the most complicated solution rather than the simplest solution? Absolutely. This happens far too often. Uh, Sometimes you get a group of those overachievers together, and all they want to do is show how much they think they know and try to outshine everybody to the left or right of them. And oftentimes, the best solution, as you all know, is the KISS solution, which is keep it simple, stupid. And so as the time went on, they want to know, is it a good idea or a bad idea or to have 5 out of 12 projects completed successfully? Well, when I look at that, 5 out of 12 completed, that's 40% success rate. 40% is less than 50%. So I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. But once again, it depends on the culture and the climate and what is the accepted norm of the company. However, since the CEO did come in and talk to everybody with his concerns, it's obviously a big problem. Um, and of the projects that went well, none of them produced a cash cow that would let the company fall on that while they try to figure out what's wrong with the other projects. And so in the beginning, they were pointing to the project manager as the source of the failure. And so they're asking, can a project manager prevent failure? But of course, and in that same aspect, anybody can prevent failure. Uh, as we say in the military, and probably some other places, you are as strong as your weakest link. If they would have had meaningful and regular meetings, some of this may have been avoided. It appears to me that communication is the biggest problem here, yet again, for this company. Um, and so they ask, is it inherently dangerous to encourage a project manager to recommend that his or her project be terminated during the early life cycle phases? Well, once again, to me, that depends on the culture and the climate of the company. Some companies will perhaps terminate you if you have an idea that you want to go in and cancel a project. You know, uh, is the company willing to cut their losses early, or will you risk being terminated because you quote unquote gave up on the project? But once again, it all depends on the culture and the climate of the company. So who, if anyone, should be blamed for the failure of the projects in this case study? As I see it, the ultimate responsibility rests on the shoulders of Al Gray, who is the president and CEO of the company. He failed to provide the proper guidance of what I call purpose, motivation, and direction, a little PMD, to his subordinate leaders. It appears they never had follow up or progress meetings during the 12-month period. I think that he realizes that now, and that is why he came in and he is attempting to get the group refocused, and he will now provide them with a little purpose, motivation, and direction. Because that's all they need. They were out there running, freelancing, and nobody really got anything done. Another question about little Miss Ann Hawthorne. They ask, is her description of the engineers realistic? Well, to me, that is subjective, but that's also her opinion, and her experiences may not reflect the experiences of others. She does have a very strong opinion, however, on the engineer department, though, and I have a feeling that they will probably view her a little differently going forward if they did not already know her feelings toward them initially. Uh, would I agree with Al Gray that the real cause of the failures is a lack of good metrics? And if this is the cause or the case, then how would I justify that other projects were successful? I really don't think personally that metrics is the culprit here. Once again, I feel or I think it's a leadership failure. Uh, Looking at Exhibit 2 as to why they failed, appears to me that they waited too long to terminate some projects. There's some reasons for termination that just doesn't make any sense to me. And I think it's leadership, failure to follow up and follow through. So as we move on, they're looking at, trying to identify who should be in charge of something. They ask, should the PMO take the lead in the establishment of the metrics? Well, I can say that perhaps they should manage it after everyone else gives their input. That way you have one department monitoring things. But once again, this will only be effective if everyone buys in and agrees to work with the PMO. One of the other case studies we had, the PMO uh, was resisted highly by the senior leadership. And this looks like this is going to be another one of those type of things if it's not handled correctly. Um, So, are a few days enough time to for a follow-on meeting? And should the executives attend this meeting? Absolutely, yes. A few days puts everyone on notice that the boss means business. How many days do you need to explain failure? And what are you going to do to make it better? Everyone involved should attend this meeting so they can get reacquainted with the climate and culture of this company. You don't need 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or a quarter to figure out what we did wrong and what can we do to make it better. We can do this in a couple of days. Let's get the ball rolling and stop playing around. So, is there a relationship between capturing the best practices and development of new metrics? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Using best practices, people who develop that and use that, that's probably one of the best things that you can do. Best practices have been performed by others and have shown success, and it's been good. It's a great tool to use when you're first starting out or revamping outdated or even failed practices. So they put together this team, um, and Al Gray decided to choose some other people other than the senior leadership. So the question was, is the makeup of this team correct? And should someone from senior management also have been part of the team? I would say at this point, Al Gray made a command decision to put people in charge that he had the faith and confidence in. I think the seniors should take note of that and get their act together, or they may not be in that position much longer. It's not personal, it's business. That's just the bottom line. Does it seem reasonable that some people might feel that a metrics can be a spying machine? As I read this, I laughed because for some it can be presumed that, but I don't think it'll take away from the engineers' creativity or R&D to do what they need to do. It just holds people more accountable for what they're doing during the day. Some people are resistant to change. I would introduce the little movie that's called "Who Moved My Cheese." It's a little cartoon uh, about a mouse and his brother, him and Haw. So if you haven't never seen that, you might want to take a look at it. But it kind of helps people understand change. Um, but at the end of the day, I'm always saying if you're doing the right thing when someone's around or in the absence of leadership, then you don't need to worry whether or not they're spying on you. You're there to do a job, do your job. So John posed 4 questions uh, as this process went on, and they're asking, were the 4 questions posed by John correct? I think so because they're measurable steps. Um, He's not asking intimidating questions. It identifies to me accountability for those that are concerned. I think it's a good start, especially since they're working basically from a clean slate. Since the president came in, said, "This is what we need to do. Let's make some things happen and let's get refocused. Let's get re energized." These are good questions. Now, if there were some questions that I may have included that might be appropriate for these projects, I would want to know who is responsible for what. You have to identify by name somebody to put them in charge and put them on notice that they are in charge. And maybe a time frame for completion of certain steps. Maybe not the complete end state, but some measurable steps in between. Want to know how much money and all the resources that you have available for you to do your job. Even though the top tier will meet monthly or quarterly, I think that bottom tier and that middle tier should meet more frequently, perhaps weekly or as needed to provide feedback and to troubleshoot in order for the middle management and the top management to brief at the executive level. So you have to do that. Until things start running smoothly, you have to have meetings, you have to do follow up so that you can fix the problem as quickly as possible. So I knew this question was going to come because as this thing started going on and I'm getting more involved in there, uh, there are risk of reporting too many metrics. And as on a slide that's upcoming, even putting the stuff on the slide in this PowerPoint presentation was too much. Um, Confusion is the number one thing to me of reporting too many things. You can overload people with too much information at one time. This is never good for a company trying to dig its way out of a hole and just learning something new. Having too many tasks to do will detract from the regular day to day operations as well. People will lose focus because they will spend so much time on preparing the questions that were probably asked of them to do, and they got to go and make a brief so they can be prepared to brief the briefer. And then, in retrospect, what are the risks of reporting too little? Well, obviously, if you report too little, it leaves so many questions unanswered. And it can also demonstrate that you're not on target as to the direction in which the company needs to be going. You have to gauge what is too little and what is too much. And the way you can gauge that is by looking at people's facial expressions or nonverbal communication, or some people will just flat out tell you, whoa, 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 slow down. That's way too much stuff. So, once again, I think about the KISS principle. Keep it simple and just be informative and detailed and intensive. So this is the chart that they were talking about, and we put some things into what I felt were directional, practical, quantitative, and things like that. This is a very busy metrics chart, which is too busy and gets very confusing for some people. And I'm glad that the subsequent questions asked about narrowing some things down. So as we were looking at that metric, then contain key performance indicators. And the question was, is there a simple way to differentiate between a metric and a KPI? So we look at a KPI that it basically relates to decision making. And you have to have targets with end states in them. Metrics are the groupings of targets that they want to do as a whole. I like to think of metrics as being a shotgun. When you fire a shotgun, it sprays pellets and you hope to hit something. But a KPI is like an M16. You have to aim at what you're going to get and you fire the weapon and you hit your target. One shot, one kill. But you're focused on one thing at a time. So when you're looking at that, you want to know what factors can determine how many KPIs should be reported. Uh, in my opinion, it's all based on the number and size of the company and the issues that need to be fixed. So you have to look at that, sit down and discuss it, and you should be able to move on. How many of the metrics in Exhibit 2 are now considered KPIs? To me, I would only look at about 10 so that this can streamline the complexity and not be so confusing. Uh, there's just so many things in there. There's the percent of this, the percent of that, cost of this, the cost of that. What happens if you don't do it? What happens if you do it? And just one little measure in there of customer satisfaction. Yeah, it's got to be one of the key ones in there. And so, can you measure any KPI? I would say yes. Um, you can put a measure on just about anything. Um, so, yeah, you can measure these KPIs because it's all about targeting. And so, does Exhibit One satisfy the necessity for a target for a KPI? And once again, to me, I think that this is a subjective question. Uh, and for this instance, I would say yes, it can be used this way. So as we're moving along, sorry to bore you to death. I know this is a long time, but bear with me. We have a few more slides to go to. Um, they ask, what factors would make this more subjective than objective? So they looked at the innovation and the R&D department, and they thought that it would make it more subjective because you're initializing products, and you can't really become objective until there is at least a product to review. As they moved on, almost everything was subjective versus objective in there because the people can't get along with each other and they all have different viewpoints and different vantage points. So it's all subject to interpretation as well. Um, so, which leads you into if these innovation projects were for external rather than internal clients, who should have more influence in the selection of the value components? Would it be the customer or the contractor doing the work? Mm, I would have to go with the customer. The customer will have more influence as that is your ultimate target audience that you are trying to reach. You can use surveys to find out what the customer wants and what they're willing to pay for and kind of tweak here and there to produce the product they want. The contractor doing the work will do the work because that's what they do. So you need to always focus on the customer. And that's what this is all about, customer satisfaction. And while you're doing that, they want to know, can the value of these components change over the life cycle phases? And if so, under what circumstances? Now, there's plenty of circumstances, and yes, they can and they do change. Um, Many things change over time. You look at the stock market, the availability of resources, the cost of resources, the updates to current trends and innovations, um, also supply and demand. Are you producing something that people want, and are you producing it quickly enough? And do you have anything on hand? And they were putting together this chart of what's accepted, the norms, things that they had to put a value on something, and they put a value at 2.0 as accepted based on their metric scheme and value components. And so the question was asked, at what level uh, or value contribution level would the project definitely be canceled? Well, they set the parameter at about 1.75, where if the value of the project came down to that, then the project may not be producing the desired value and should be reevaluated and considered for termination. Um, so, under what conditions would a project still be allowed to continue, even if it falls below the acceptable value threshold limit? And that's a very interesting thing, and it makes complete sense. Um, if there's some other projects um, that are out there that are making significant contributions elsewhere, then it could compensate for the potential problems that are going on there. So maybe while that's making big money on the right, you find out why the left isn't doing so well, and you have an opportunity, since the right is making some money for you, to tweak and change and update whatever's going on and fix it, or you just simply terminate it. So then, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each approach? So what are they talking about? Mr. Gray came back in and he identified some other necessities that need to be looked at, and one of them is who do you include in the decision-making processes? And I he said they're doing a better job of on canceling projects and this, that, or the other, but perhaps he needed some more involvement from management. But he wasn't quite sure, so he asked his people what they thought. And as I said from the beginning, I feel that this was the problem from the onset. This is all Mr. Gray's fault, if you will, the president. He's the ultimate one responsible for the good, the bad, and the indifferent. Uh, Management at every level in this scenario has been shirking their duty by not being involved in a timely manner. And then they will throw anyone under the bus when they have an opportunity when these things go wrong. I believe that the seniors should mentor the mid and lower levels and hold meetings with them regularly to get updates. It's just that simple. The mid and lower management need to work accordingly and get the feedback from those who are doing the work. Okay, I have to use this as an example because I spent 24 years in the military, and this is a very simple process. You have a squad leader. Squad leader manages 5 to 7 people. You tell the squad leader what needs to be done. He looks down the line, tells everybody, hey, blah, 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 this is what you need to do. Bang, bang, bang. Once it's done, he'll report to the platoon sergeant. The platoon sergeant manages 35 to 40 people. The platoon sergeant gave the squad leader the directive. Squad leader carries it out. He gives the feedback. Sergeant, this is done. Check. Boom. Move on to the next thing. The platoon sergeant then goes to the first sergeant. The first sergeant gave the platoon sergeant the directive. So now the platoon sergeant's going to the first sergeant and say, hey, first sergeant, this and this and this was done. Everything's good. This is what went good, bad, right, wrong, what's broke, what needs to fix, whatever. He gives them the complete status report. Now, as this goes all the way up, the first sergeant reports to the company commander because the company commander gave the first sergeant the directive to do what needs to be done. So it's a trickle down and trickle back up theory. So everything is being reported up and down. Communication lines are open, and everyone is doing their job, and they're given their authority to do their job. This is so easy to do, and if people gave the authority, then this coincides, and this goes right into the question of which approach would I have taken. I'd go with the second level and give my mid and lower level managers the respect and authority that they deserve. They are where the rubber meets the road, and they are on the ground, and they know what's going on. They can fix issues on the spot with due diligence and prevent that mistrust from the upper levels that they have right now, because the upper levels aren't down there checking out and seeing what's going on. And that is why you have these positions. Hold people's feet to the fire to get the job done. Treat them right, and they will produce tangible results for you. So they were talking about after you cancel everything, and should you use an exit champion? And can an exit champion use different criterion, such as looking only at a return on investment? Well, of course. But once again, it depends on the climate and the culture of the company. If you're using, well, like I said, in this scenario, they're using a steering committee that the company has put into place to look at why they canceled or should they cancel a project or whatever. And they bring in the exit champion to make a decision. If he's only going to use information gathered on the return on investment, and if that's enough information to give to the steering committee to run with and cancel it, that's great. But once again, that all depends on the culture and the climate of Mr. Gray and his company, whether or not they will use that. Some people may want more information. So we're getting down to the end. Hang on. I know you're sleepy. You probably have already fallen asleep by now. But here's the last slide for you, and we'll wrap it up. And I'll ask for any questions if you have any. And the last two questions are this. Can a metric for predicting success be developed? Absolutely, and it should be. They should look at data from the last year or past year's performances and look at trends this year to predict next year and work to get ahead with good par levels. Definitely look at your data. You have to keep some books. Look at the past performance, look at your current performance, and look at the future trends, and look at some of your other competitors as well. And can a metric for predicting the capacity needs be developed? If you don't have one of these, you will and are doomed for failure, and you probably will. Now that you're having some success, as this company is starting to see, they need to make sure that they keep up with supply and demand. They need to make sure that they have the right people, the right tools, and the equipment to do the job. As this is unfolding now, they are behind in production, and people are now working overtime and weekends just to keep up with demand. So they better get on top of this before they end up getting a bad reputation and start losing business. And then they're back down to square one, uh, trying to figure it out all over again. So, in conclusion, I'd like to say that this was a very good course. This was a very good case to review. Very lengthy. This is about a 30-minute presentation. I'm not even sure if YouTube will upload it, but I'm going to stop now so that we can figure it out. So thank you and have a great evening.